Markdown is everywhere, and for good reason. It's a simple format that's easy to edit and read using just a simple text editor, but allows us to format text in a powerful way later. It's often used by LLMs and editors like Obsidian. And today, we're going to use it in our blog application for writing posts. First, I'd like to show you the final result. This is an app with some blog posts, all created using Markdown. And now when we go to the Show Post page, we have headers, paddings, even code highlighting. And all of this is just the result of converting Markdown. Let's see how to implement it using MDEx. Going back in time, here's our starting point. We have a basic Phoenix application with one schema, post, that I've just created using Phoenix generators. Our blog posts have only two fields, title and content. As you can see at this starting point, the content isn't formatted nicely at all. It's just a piece of text, even without new lines. By the way, the only change I made after generating this app is removing the content column here on the list of posts to make it more readable. Now, to the point. We start by adding MDEx to our mix.exs file. And I prepared this simple Elixir script here to help me demonstrate its basic features. It's just a module with one function. We have this raw string hash hello world, and we're going to use one of MDEx functions that allow us to convert it to one of the supported formats. They all start with to, and the most interesting for us is the toHTML function. We don't need to pass any options for this basic use case, and when we run the script, we can see that it converted this Markdown string into an actual HTML header. Nice. But that's only one way of using MDEx. There's also the MDEx sigil, which is actually considered more idiomatic and better in cases where it can be used. To use the sigil, we have to import it first or add use MDEx to our module. The second option will also make some macros defined by MDEx available in case we need them. This time, instead of calling our function on a string, we use the MD sigil, containing the Markdown. I use square brackets here because they won't conflict with quotation marks, for example. And we also need to provide the format we want to convert this Markdown to as a suffix. It's HTML in our case. Let's print it out. Nice. As you can see, the result is the same, but there's a key difference here. The Markdown you can see here is parsed at compile time, so it improves performance at runtime. But on the other hand, we can't use it with Markdown that is dynamic, like post content loaded from the database in our case. So we'll have to use the toHTML function in this case. One last thing, we can't use simple string interpolation with this sigil. So if you want to insert some dynamic value into our content, we need to use HEEx syntax and assigns. Like this with name Elixir. Then we can insert it into our template. Yeah, it works. So worth remembering if you want to merge static compile time Markdown with some dynamic values. Let's get back to our application. As you've seen previously, it's just a wall of text that doesn't look good at all. We'd like to first change this screen here, and this is our show screen. First, we'll replace the title in our header with the actual post title. Let's also remove this list of title and content and just leave the post content here. Okay, so that's it about cleanup. Not much changed yet, but you can now see the real title at the top and the unformatted content below. Now the fun part. We'll convert the Markdown content into HTML. First, let's move fetching the post. And for the content, we'll use MDEx to HTML, just like before. But we'll use the version without the bank to handle errors gracefully. So now for our post content, we'll check the result. If it's okay, we'll return the resulting HTML. And if there's an error, we'll fall back to the empty string. Good, but it's still just an HTML string, so to make it work, we need to add row here to render this as HTML. Important notice, it's safe to use it with user-provided content because MDEx sanitizes the input. If there's any HTML, it removes it by default. So all the HTML we get is the one coming from converting the Markdown. Now it looks much better, but as you can see, headers aren't formatted properly. This is because we're using Tailwind, which by default removes formatting for headers. However, Tailwind has a plugin prepared just for cases like that. It's called Typography. We can enable this plugin inside our app CSS. It's one of the default plugins, so it's just a matter of adding this line here. Now we can enable it with a Pros class wherever we need it to format HTML with some sensible typography styles. Let's have a look. So we have proper headers, margins, syntax highlighting. Even all Markdown links were converted into HTML links. Last thing I'd like to show you today is using MDEx with HEEx format. Let's say we want to add section inviting to subscribe to our newsletter. We could use regular Phoenix component here, but MDEx HEEx sigil will make it easier to keep it consistent with the rest of the post content. First, let's create a new component called subscribe section with some assigns. And now, instead of using H sigil like we usually do in Phoenix, we'll use the MDEx one with some Markdown. Then we'll add it to our page here. And we also need to remember to require our sigil or add use MDEx. But we're still getting an error. The component function should return a rendered struct, but instead it returns just a plain HTML string. This is why we need to use the HEEx version of the sigil instead. This sigil also gives us some other nice HEEx features. For example, we can use assigns inside, like want to see more posts like, and use the title assign here. We can pass it as an assign, just like a regular Phoenix component. And let's see how it looks. Yeah. We can also use other Phoenix components. For example, if you want to navigate to another page, we can add subscribe button. Cool. We have formatting from the Pros class, and it looks just like other Markdown sections. But at the same time, we can use both assigns and other components like buttons. Let's quickly add some more formatting here. Some horizontal lines around the section and italics to the title. Looks a little nicer. And yeah, every article has this subscribe section at the end. Great, so summarizing, with just a few lines of code, we were able to convert our raw Markdown into a nicely formatted article. No matter if we used an app like Obsidian, LLM, or just an HTML text area to create it. The beauty and portability of Markdown in its best. If you want to learn more about other MDEx features, including streaming incomplete Markdown, great feature for building LLM chats, see their nice new website or their extensive documentation. I would also recommend checking the usage rules. That's a file originally intended to be used by LLM agents, but I noticed they have very well explained guidelines about when to use a sigil and when to use two functions, for example. So yeah, that would be it for today. Thank you and see you next time.